You have already broken this ancient rule of wealth, and it is costing you everything you think you are building. The warrior path reveals a singular discipline that modern financial systems were specifically designed to make you forget, and by the end of this, you will understand why that forgetting was never an accident. Here is the wound most people walk around with and call normal. Every month the salary arrives, the rent takes its cut, the utility company takes its cut, the subscription services take their cuts, the grocery store, the commute, the phone bill, the credit minimum. One by one, every institution in your life reaches into that account before you do. And when the bleeding finally stops, you look at what remains and call it savings. You call it discipline. You call what is left over your financial future. That is not a plan. That is a surrender. Financial theory, as it is taught today, gives you tools without a spine. Compound interest charts, index fund projections, diversified portfolios, elegant structures built on rotten ground. The ground is this. The system assumes you will act rationally. Emotion does not exist in its equations. It draws a straight line between income and outcome and expects you to walk it perfectly every single month for 30 years in a world that bombards you with temptation, panic, and distraction approximately every 7 seconds. Arithmetic dressed as wisdom. That is all it is. The ancient warrior tradition understood something the modern financial model refuses to admit. Discipline is not a quality you possess. It is a structure you build. Before theory, before calculation, before the market opens and the advertisements start and your colleague tells you about a stock tip. The samurai did not win battles by being smarter than their enemies in the moment of chaos. They won by structuring their preparation so completely that when chaos arrived, the discipline was already embedded in every action. What you are about to hear is not a motivational theory. It is a structural correction. A surgical removal of the habit that is quietly draining your capacity before you even begin to build. Every financial system ever designed by an institution was designed for the institution first. Read that sentence again and let the weight of it settle. The bank does not profit from your surplus. It profits from your flow. The tax authority does not wait until you have secured your future. It arrives first, automatically, with the precision of a siege formation that has already surrounded the city before the inhabitants realize there is a war. This is the crime that has become invisible because it has been normalized. You work, you produce, you generate the resources that make the entire economy move. And at the very end of that process, after every other hand has reached in, you receive what remains and you are expected to build a life from the scraps of your own labor. The warrior class would have recognized this arrangement immediately, not as economics, as defeat by design. Here is the deception that runs deeper than the tax and the bill. Even among people who understand the problem, most still operate from what can be called the illusion of leftovers. The thought sounds reasonable when you say it out loud. I will save what I have left at the end of the month. It sounds like restraint. It sounds like patience. It is neither. It is a guarantee of poverty wrapped in the language of intention. Because at the end of the month, there are never leftovers. There is only the proof of every impulse, every small indulgence, every friction point where discipline momentarily surrendered to comfort. The leftovers are always gone. They were never yours. They were already promised to your future impulses the moment you decided saving would be the last act instead of the first. Now consider what the warrior knew about defense. A samurai preparing for battle does not arm himself after the enemy is already in the courtyard. He arms himself at dawn, before the day has presented any threat, because the armor is not a reaction to danger. The armor is a position of readiness. The armor changes what is possible from the first hour. A man in full armor does not scramble when the gates are breached. He decides. This is the shield-first principle, and it inverts everything the modern financial narrative tells you. Modern finance says, earn, spend wisely, save what remains. The warrior tradition says, earn, protect first, then operate from what remains. The sequence is everything. The same income, the same expenses, a completely different outcome. Not because the numbers changed, but because the architecture of the decision changed. Think about what reversing that sequence looks like in your actual life. You wake up. The salary has arrived. Before the rent calculation, before the grocery estimate, before the impulse check of what you might need this week, a fixed portion of that income moves. Not because you summoned extraordinary willpower in that moment, because the system you built made the choice for you before you were even fully awake. Stop waiting for motivation to arrive before building structure. Motivation is weather. Structure is terrain. Weather changes every day. Terrain is what determines whether armies advance or stop dead. There is a moment in every financial journey where this truth lands differently than it did the first time, where the arithmetic stops being theoretical and starts feeling personal. If this is that moment for you, pause right now and tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching this from. Because the warrior tradition does not belong to one culture or one country. It belongs to every person who finally decides to stop bleeding and start building. Hojo Soun was not born into power. This is the part of his story that the history books mention briefly and then move past, but it is the most important part. He was a low-ranking military official who rose to become one of the most formidable daimyo of the Sengoku period, not through inheritance, not through alliance alone, but through the relentless application of a personal code that governed every hour of his existence. In his 21 articles, written after 1495 as a code of conduct for every person who served him, Soun addressed something that most military leaders of his era did not consider worth writing down. He addressed the morning. He wrote that a man should rise before the birds do, that the first hours of the day, before the world has made its demands, are where a man's true character is formed. Not in battle, not in strategy sessions. In the quiet of the morning, when no one is watching and there is no external pressure to perform. Article after article in that code returns to the same underlying principle. Your daily structure is your destiny, not your talent, not your ambition. Your structure, the way you wake, the way you dress, the way you manage what belongs to you before you manage what belongs to others. Soun understood that a man who cannot govern his own morning cannot govern an army, and a man who cannot govern an army cannot hold territory, and a man who cannot hold territory will lose everything he builds. The financial parallel is exact. Soun also wrote something remarkable about material appearance. He instructed his followers not to try to look splendid when appearing before others, and specifically warned against borrowing another's finery to compensate for plain possessions, calling it needless ostentation that invites ridicule. A military leader in 15th century feudal Japan was describing, with complete precision, what we now call lifestyle inflation. The compulsion to signal status before security has been established. The wound that empties the account while the face pretends fullness. If this wisdom is landing with force right now, if you feel the sharp edge of recognition, press the like symbol on this video. Because what you are receiving is not a financial tip. It is a surgical correction from a man who built a dynasty from almost nothing and documented exactly how he did it. Here is where structure becomes the weapon. Automating the payment to yourself removes the most dangerous variable in any financial plan. You are not lazy. You are not undisciplined in some permanent, character-defining way. You are human, which means you are neurologically wired to value present comfort over future security at approximately a ratio of 3-to-1. The brain works exactly as it was designed to work. But you are not managing a species. You are managing one life, your life, and that life requires a system that functions without depending on your impulse control to hold perfectly every single day. When the transfer happens before you touch the principle, the decision was made by a version of you that was thinking clearly. The warrior who sharpens the blade before the battle does not debate whether to sharpen it mid-fight. The pressure point was removed in advance. That is not a small thing. That is the entire game. The discipline of denial follows naturally from this structure. Every purchase you do not make from your protected capital is a victory, not over the product, over the impulse. And the warrior who learns to count that kind of victory knows something the chronic spender never will. That present comfort, traded for future sovereignty, is the most expensive transaction on the market. Pay yourself first. 3 words simple enough to dismiss, which is exactly why most people dismiss them and remain poor. But underneath that simplicity is a complete philosophical reorientation of your relationship with your own labor. Paying yourself first means asserting, before anyone else has the opportunity to disagree, that your future is the primary obligation. The foundational contract. The one bill that is never late, never negotiated, never deferred until things settle down. A samurai who does not protect his own life in battle cannot protect anyone else's. A household that does not first secure its own financial structure cannot build anything durable beyond it. The sequence is not optional. The sequence is the principle itself. Now this is where the teaching moves from principle to strategy, and Yamamoto Kansuke understood strategy at a level that went far beyond the battlefield. Kansuke served the Takeda clan during the Sengoku period and authored the Heiho Okugisho, The Secret of High Strategy, a text that remained within his family for generations before it was finally published in 1804. What made Kansuke remarkable was not speed or aggression. It was his doctrine of the indirect approach. His most famous strategic contribution, the woodpecker strategy at the Battle of Kawanakajima, involved sending a force to a mountain position to flush the enemy downward while the main army waited below. The enemy was not defeated by direct confrontation. They were maneuvered into a position of disadvantage by a sequence of indirect moves that the enemy only understood when reversing course was no longer possible. Apply this to your financial architecture. Most people try to build wealth through direct confrontation with their income. They stare at the number, make a budget, try to spend less through raw willpower, direct assault against an enemy that has been conditioning them for decades. That approach almost always fails because the opposing force is older and more practiced than any single act of resolve. The indirect approach works differently. You do not fight the impulse. You remove the opportunity for the impulse to act. The money moves before the impulse wakes up. The budget is not a list of restrictions you must consciously obey every morning. It is a structure that was already decided. You do not resist the temptation to spend because the resource is no longer available to the tempted part of your mind. Building the fortress is not a single act. It is a sequence of decisions made from clarity, before urgency arrives, that collectively create a position of security from which every other financial action can be taken without panic. What most people call saving is reactive. What Kansuke would recognize as true capital building is proactive positioning, securing the ground before the battle, not after the first losses have already been absorbed. Do not let the simplicity of this fool you. The most dangerous enemies in any theater are the ones who look like they have already surrendered. The inner enemy is not greed. That framing is too dramatic, too easy to externalize and therefore too easy to ignore. What actually drains people is far more ordinary. The unremarkable impulse to feel relief right now rather than earn freedom later. It wears the face of a meal you deserved after a hard week. A purchase that makes this particular Thursday slightly more bearable. A small reward for surviving a difficult month. Nobody goes broke on any single one of these decisions. They go broke on the accumulated weight of all of them, compounding quietly over years, while the plan they said they would start next month never quite begins. Think about the timing of it. The reward of spending is immediate. You feel it in the moment of purchase. The punishment arrives 15 years later silently, in the form of an account that should exist and does not. The brain, which evolved to prioritize immediate threats and immediate rewards, was never built to feel that 15-year gap as urgency. Fighting this reality with willpower alone is like sending a single infantry unit against a fortified position and calling it a campaign plan. Miyamoto Musashi wrote in the Book of Five Rings that a man must not have a favorite weapon, because over-attachment to any single tool creates a predictable vulnerability. The warrior who relies on willpower as his primary financial instrument has made willpower his favorite weapon. When it fails, and it will fail, on the day when everything is hard and the impulse is louder than usual, the entire structure collapses around that single point of failure. Fewer decisions requiring willpower, that is the answer. Here is where Laozi's teaching from the Tao Te Ching cuts through with unsettling precision. The way never acts, and yet nothing remains undone. Wu Wei, effortless action, is not passivity or resignation. It is the understanding that the highest form of strategy designs conditions under which the right result becomes inevitable, rather than pushing against resistance every single day, hoping discipline holds. When you automate your wealth-building mechanism, you stop fighting your own nature and start working with the architecture of the system instead. The river does not strain against its course. It moves by the path already cut for it, and it reaches its destination without hesitation and without exhaustion. Delayed gratification seen through this lens stops feeling like punishment. The warrior who passes the village on the march, eyes forward, capital ahead, does not feel deprived. He feels clear. He knows what the looter does not, that everything the looter grabbed in a moment of relief cost him the campaign he was supposed to win. Present comfort and future sovereignty are in direct competition for the same resource. The warrior, by definition, already knows which one wins wars. Honan, the teacher who lived from 1133 to 1212, built an entire doctrine around a principle that is extraordinarily simple to state and extraordinarily rare to actually practice. He taught exclusive focus. One path, chosen with full clarity, committed to without reservation, practiced with the kind of singular consistency that most people admire in theory and abandon within 2 weeks when life becomes inconvenient. What made his teaching radical was the insistence on exclusivity itself. His contemporaries wanted to maintain multiple practices simultaneously, to hedge, to keep options open, to hold one foot in each tradition just in case. Honan refused that compromise. He argued that divided attention produces divided results and that any path worth walking requires the kind of unwavering commitment where compromise stops feeling like flexibility and starts feeling like the actual threat. Bring that idea into your financial architecture with its full weight. Most people do not fail to build wealth because they lack a method. They fail because they never fully commit to any single method. They start the automated transfer and cancel it after one difficult month. They build the structure, then grant themselves an exception for a celebration, then another for an emergency, and then another simply because the system feels heavy and the old habits feel familiar. They read the principle, feel its truth in the moment, and return to the comfortable chaos of the existing arrangement, because discomfort is still discomfort, even when the comfortable thing is what is destroying them. The ironclad wealth code is not a collection of tactics you rotate depending on the season. It is one clear, non-negotiable commitment. A percentage of every income moved first, automatically, before the world builds its case for why this particular month should be the exception. That commitment, held with Honan's exclusive focus, protected by Kansuki's indirect architecture, structured by Sound's morning discipline, and sustained by Laozi's principle of effortless design, becomes something no market correction can take from you, and no impulse can negotiate away at 3 p.m. on a bad day. A fortress built correctly does not require its defenders to fight every day. It required them to build it correctly once. Picture the version of you that understood this 10 years ago and acted on it. The account that would exist right now. The decisions that would be available to you, not made from pressure, not made at the edge of the month with the numbers running short, but made from a position of calm that money, properly protected, actually creates. That version of you is still available. Not for 10 years ago. For every year that follows today. The warrior does not grieve the battles fought poorly. He corrects the formation and holds the new ground permanently. If this channel has handed you a weapon today, the only question worth asking is whether you pick it up. Subscribe, because the next weapon should reach you before you need it, not after the damage is already done. The ancient rule was never broken by accident. It was broken by a system that was built to benefit from your forgetting. Now you remember.